The coastal town of Haven's Reach smelled of salt and secrets, its jagged cliffs looming over a restless sea that churned like the thoughts in Lila Carver's mind. The air was thick, with the tang of brine and the faint sweetness of blooming gorse, a wild yellow flower that clung to the hillsides like a stubborn hope. Lila stood at the edge of her porch, her bare feet curling against the weathered wood, staring at the horizon where the sky bled into dusk. At 34, she was a woman of quiet, strength-dark hair pulled into a messy bun, hazel eyes that saw too much, and hands calloused from years of running the town's only bakery. Haven's Reach adored her sourdough, but they didn't know the weight she carried, the one she'd buried beneath flour-dusted aprons and forced smiles. Her husband, Ethan, was late again. A fisherman by trade, he'd been coming home later each night, his excuses as thin as the threadbare nets he claimed to mend. Lila wasn't naive. She'd caught the whiff of lavender on his coat, a scent that didn't grow anywhere near these cliffs. She'd ignored it for months, telling herself it was nothing, that love could weather storms. But that morning, she'd found something in his truck, a silver earring shaped like a teardrop, glinting in the glove box like a shard of broken trust. It wasn't hers. The screen door creaked behind her, and she turned to see Ethan step inside, his broad shoulders slumping as he kicked off his boots. He was handsome in a rugged waist and bleached hair, a jawline carved by wind and worry but tonight. His blue eyes wouldn't meet hers. "Rough day on the water," he muttered, tossing his keys onto the counter with a clatter. The sound grated against her nerves. "Rough enough to lose an earring out there?" Lila's voice was steady, but her pulse hammered. She held up the teardrop between her fingers, letting it catch the dim light of the kitchen. Ethan froze, his hand halfway to the fridge, and for a moment, the only sound was the distant crash of waves against the rocks below. "Lila, he started, but she cut him off, stepping closer, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. "Don't. Just tell me who she is." Her words trembled with a mix of fury and fragility, a crack in the dam she'd built around her heart. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed, his silence louder than any confession. Before he could find his voice, the phone rang a shrill, insistent sound that sliced through the tension. Lila ignored it, her eyes locked on him, but Ethan lunged for the receiver like it was a lifeline. "Yeah?" he barked, turning away. His shoulders stiffened, and after a murmured exchange, he hung up, his face pale. "That was Tom down at the docks. They found something in the nets today, some old wreck, half sunk off the point. There's cash inside, a lot of it." Lila blinked, the earring still pinched between her fingers. "What are you talking about?" "Bundles of it, Lila. Wrapped in plastic like it's been down there for years. They're pulling it up now." Ethan's voice shook, not with guilt anymore, but with something else, greed maybe, or desperation. He grabbed his coat, already heading for the door. "I've got to go see this." "You're not walking out on this conversation," she snapped, stepping into his path. "Who is she, Ethan? Tell me now, or I swear." "It's not what you think," he said too fast, his eyes darting to the earring. It's complicated. I'll explain later after I get back. This could change everything for us." "Us?" The word tasted bitter in her mouth. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the roar of his truck's engine cut her off as he peeled out of the driveway, leaving her standing there, the earring digging into her palm. The wind picked up, rattling the windows, and Lila's gaze drifted to the sea, where the horizon swallowed the last of the light. She didn't notice the shadow moving along the cliff path until it was too late, a figure in a hooded coat, watching her from the edge of the property. When she turned, it was gone, but the chill that ran down her spine wasn't from the ocean breeze. Inside, the phone rang again, unanswered, its echo bouncing off the walls like a warning. And then, in the silence that followed, she heard it. A faint knock at the back door. The knock came again, sharper this time, a staccato rap that jolted Lila from her daze. She stood frozen in the kitchen, the silver earring still clutched in her hand, its edges biting into her skin. The wind howled outside Haven's Reach, tugging at the shingles of the old house. But that knock, it wasn't the storm. It was deliberate, insistent, Her bare feet hesitated on the hardwood as she edged toward the back door, the one that faced the cliffs and the narrow path snaking down to the sea. Ethan had left minutes ago, his truck's taillights long swallowed by the dusk. Who else would come now, unannounced, on a night like this? She flipped on the porch light, its weak glow spilling through the glass pane, and peered out. A woman stood there, her silhouette framed against the churning black of the ocean beyond. She was tall, her face half hidden by the hood of a dark coat, but a strand of auburn hair slipped free, catching the light like a flicker of flame. Lila's stomach twisted. Something about the way the woman stood, poised yet tense, felt wrong. Familiar, maybe, though she couldn't place why. "Who's there?" Lila called, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. She didn't open the door, not yet. The woman stepped closer, her boots scuffing the weathered boards. "Lila Carver." Her voice was low, smooth, with an edge of urgency that cut through the wind. "We need to talk. It's about Ethan." The name hit like a punch, and Lila's fingers tightened around the doorknob. Against her better judgment, she turned the lock and pulled the door open, just enough to see. The woman's face came into focus, sharp cheekbones, green eyes that glinted with something unreadable, and lips pressed into a thin line. She was striking, maybe 30, with a beauty that felt both effortless and dangerous. That lavender scent wafted in, faint but unmistakable, and Lila's grip on the earring faltered. "Who are you?" Lila demanded, her throat dry. "And how do you know my husband?" The woman's gaze flicked to the earring in Lila's hand, then back to her face. "My name's Mara, and I'm not here to ruin your night, though I'm guessing he's already done that." She nodded toward the empty driveway. "I saw him leave. He's headed to the docks, right? That wreck they found?" Lila's mind raced. How did this stranger know about the cash? About Ethan's sudden exit? "What's it to you?" Mara hesitated, then pulled something from her coat pocket, a photograph, creased and water-stained. She held it out, and Lila took it with trembling fingers. It showed Ethan, younger, his arm around a woman with auburn hair. Mara. They were laughing, standing on a pier somewhere, the sea calm behind them. On the back, scrawled in faded ink, E&M, Summer 12. "He never told you about me, did he?" Mara's voice softened, but there was a bitter undercurrent. "We were together before you. 5 years. Then he left. Said he needed a fresh start. I thought he meant it until I saw him last month, here in town." Lila's knees buckled, and she braced herself against the doorframe. The earring, the lavender, the late night sit wasn't some random fling. It was a past Ethan had buried, a ghost now standing on her porch. "You're saying he's been with you again?" Mara's jaw tightened. "Not like that. Not yet. But he's been meeting me, yeah. Said he owed me something about money. A debt from way back. I didn't believe him until tonight. That wreck they pulled up? It's not just cash down there, Lila. It's our shiz and mine. We stashed it years ago, before he ran off and found you." The world tilted beneath Lila's feet. Money in the sea? A secret life? She wanted to laugh, to scream, to throw the photo back in Mara's face. Instead, she stepped aside, letting the door swing wide. "Get in here. Now." Mara didn't hesitate, brushing past her into the kitchen. The air shifted with her presence, charged and heavy. She set a small leather pouch on the counter, something she'd been carrying, and unzipped it, revealing a stack of damp, crumpled bills. "This is just a piece of it," she said. "There's more hundreds of thousands, maybe more, still in that wreck. Ethan's down there now, trying to claim it before anyone else does. But he's not the only one who knows it's there." Lila stared at the money, then at Mara. "Who else?" Before Mara could answer, headlights swept across the windows, cutting through the dimness. A vehicle pulled into the driveway, not Ethan's truck, but a sleek black SUV Lila didn't recognize. Mara's eyes widened, and she grabbed the pouch, shoving it back into her coat. "We're out of time," she whispered. "They're here." The engine cut off, and heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel outside. A man's voice called out, low and commanding. "Mara, I know you're in there. Bring it out, or we're coming in." Lila's heart slammed against her ribs. She turned to Mara, her voice a hiss. Who the hell is that? Mara's face hardened, but her hands shook as she backed toward the door. Someone who wants what's ours, and they won't ask twice. The footsteps stopped, and the silhouette of a broad-shouldered figure filled the doorway, his shadow stretching across the floor like a noose tightening around them both. The shadow in the doorway loomed larger as the man stepped forward, his boots thudding against the porch boards with a deliberate weight. Lila's breath caught in her throat, the air in the kitchen thickening with salt and tension. Mara stood rigid beside her, one hand still clutching the leather pouch inside her coat, her green eyes darting between the figure and Lila like a cornered animal sizing up its odds. The wind outside roared, slamming a loose shutter against the house, but it was the silence from the man that chilled Lila Moss. This presence carried a quiet menace, a promise of something unstoppable. He pushed the screen door open with a gloved hand, letting it creak on its hinges. The porch light flickered, casting his face in jagged patches of show and glow. He was older than Ethan, maybe mid-40s, with a square jaw scarred along one side, and eyes like chipped slate cold, unyielding. His dark coat was damp from the sea mist, and a faint metallic tang clung to him, sharp beneath the brine. In his left hand, he held a crowbar, its rusted tip tapping lightly against his thigh. Mara, he said, his voice gravelly measured. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Hand it over. Lila's gaze flicked to Mara, then back to the man. Who are you? What do you want? She stepped forward, planting herself between him and Mara, her bare feet firm on the hardwood despite the tremor in her legs. This was her house, her life unraveling stranger or not. She wouldn't let him bulldoze through it without answers. The man's eyes shifted to her, narrowing as if sizing her up. Name's Reed, and you must be the wife. His lip curled slightly, not quite a smirk, but close enough to sting. Didn't figure Ethan for the settle-down type. Guess he's full of surprises. Get out, Lila snapped, her voice rising. Whatever this is, take it somewhere else. Reed didn't move, just tilted his head, the crowbar still tapping a slow rhythm. Wish I could, sweetheart. But your husband's got something that belongs to me, something he and Mary here thought they could hide at the bottom of the ocean. And I'm not leaving without it. Mara's hand brushed Lila's arm, a fleeting warning. He's not bluffing, she murmured, barely audible. Reed's the one we owed. The money in that wreck-it was his cut, from a job we pulled years ago. Ethan said he'd handled it, but he didn't. Reed finished, stepping inside now, the floor creaking under his weight. He was close enough that Lila could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the lines etched deep from years of hard choices. And now it's surfacing literally. So where's Ethan? Down at the dock scooping up my cash? Lila's mind spun, fragments of the night crashing together. The earring, Mara's photo, the wreck, this man. Ethan hadn't just betrayed her with a lover he'd dragged a whole damn history into their marriage, one with teeth. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, stalling, her eyes flicking to the counter where her phone sat, too far to reach. He left. That's all I've got. Reed's gaze followed hers, and he chuckled a low, dry sound. Don't bother. You're not calling anyone till we're done here. He turned to Mara, the crowbar lifting slightly. Last chance. The pouch or I start breaking things, starting with this pretty little house. Mara's breath hitched, and she pulled the leather pouch from her coat, holding it out like a shield. This is all I've got, Reed. The rest is still down there. You want it. Go fish it out yourself. He snatched it from her, unzipping it with one hand, to glance at the damp bills inside. His jaw tightened. This isn't even a tenth of it. You think I'm stupid? He tossed the pouch onto the counter, the bills spilling out like a taunt, and took a step closer to Mara. Where's the map? Lila's brow furrowed. Map? Mara shot her a look shut up, but it was too late. Reed's attention snapped back to Lila, his eyes glinting. Oh, she didn't tell you? That wreck's not just some lucky find. It's marked. Ethan and Mara had a chart, a little treasure map to their stash, and I'm betting one of them still has it. I don't have it, Mara said quickly, her voice rising. Ethan took it when he left me. If it's anywhere, it's with him or here. She gestured vaguely at the house, a desperate edge to her words. Reed's gaze swept the room, lingering on the cluttered shelves, the fishing gear by the door, the photo of Lila and Ethan on the wall smiling, oblivious, a lifetime ago. Then he moved, faster than Lila expected, grabbing a chair and flipping it over with a crash. Then we'll tear this place apart till we find it. Lila lunged forward, shoving at his arm. Stop it. This is my home. Her words cut off as he caught her wrist, his grip iron, tight, but not bruising, a warning more than an attack. Up close, his eyes weren't just cold, they were haunted, like a man chasing something he'd already lost. Let her go, Mara said, stepping in, her voice steady now. You want the map? I'll help you look. Just leave her out of it. Reed released Lila, stepping back with a grunt. Fine, start with his stuff. I'll watch. He leaned against the counter, the crowbar resting across his knees, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. Lila rubbed her wrist, her mind racing. Ethan's thingscious desk, his truck, his secrets. If there was a map, it could be anywhere. But as Mara began rifling through a drawer, Lila's eyes caught something else. A faint light flickering outside, down the cliff path toward the sea. Not a star. Not a boat, something closer. Moving fast. Someone's coming, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Reed straightened, following her gaze. Mara froze, a handful of paper slipping from her fingers. The light grew brighter, accompanied by the faint rumble of an engine. Then, through the wind, a voice shouted, Ethan's voice, ragged and urgent. Lila, get out of the house, now. The front door burst open, and everything went to hell. The front door slammed against the wall as Ethan stumbled in, his coat soaked through, his face smeared with grime, and something darker blood maybe, though the dim light made it hard to tell. His chest heaved, and his wild blue eyes locked onto Lila's, then darted to Reed and Mara, a flicker of recognition hardening into panic. Lila, get out, he shouted again, his voice cracking like the cliffs under a storm surge. There are coming more of them. Reed was on his feet in an instant, the crowbar gripped tight, his scarred face twisting into a snarl. You little bastard, he growled, stepping toward Ethan. What did you do, huh? Lead them straight here? Who's coming? Lila demanded, her bare feet rooted to the floor, despite the adrenaline screaming at her to move. The room felt too small, the air too thick, with the four of them trapped between secrets and the sea. Outside, the engine's rumble grew louder, tires crunching gravel, and that flickering light swept across the windows again headlights, closing in fast. Ethan didn't answer. He lunged for the counter, grabbing the spilled bills from Mara's pouch, and shoving them into his coat. We don't have time, Reed. You want your cut? It's still down there, but they're here for it too. We've got to move. Mara grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. Who, Ethan? Who'd you piss off now? He shook her off, his gaze flicking to the back door. The crew from the old days. They heard about the wreck. Someone at the docks must have talked. They think it's all theirs. His voice dropped, frantic, and they're not asking nicely. Before anyone could react, the headlights blazed through the front windows, blindingly bright, and the SUV screeched to a stop outside. Doors slammed, and heavy boots hit the ground, more than one pair, more than two. Voices barked orders, clipped and harsh, drowned out by the wind, but close enough to raise the hairs on Lila's neck. Reed cursed under his breath, moving to the window and peering through the gap in the curtains. Three of them, armed. You really screwed us, Ethan. Lila's heart pounded as she turned to her husband, the man she loved, trusted, built a life with. What is this, Ethan? What did you drag me into? The earring was still in her hand, a cold, sharp reminder of the betrayal that had started this nightmare. She held it up, her voice trembling with rage. This isn't just about her, is it? It's about all of it. Money, lies, whatever you've been hiding. Ethan's face crumpled, guilt and fear warring in his eyes. Lila, I swear, I was going to tell you about Mara, the cash, Everything. I thought it was over, buried out there. But when they found the wreck today, he trailed off, glancing at the door as a fist pounded against it, rattling the frame. Open up, Carver. A voice bellowed from outside, deep and guttural. We know you've got it. Reed spun on Ethan, shoving him against the wall with a thud. Where's the map, you idiot? If they get in here, we're all dead or worse. It's not here, Ethan rasped, struggling under Reed's grip. I hit it down by the point, in the rocks. I was going to get it after the docks, but they showed up too fast. Mara stepped forward, her green eyes blazing. Then we go, now. Out the back lows them in the cliffs. Lila shook her head, disbelief warring with survival instinct. You're insane. I'm not running with you, any of you. You don't have a choice. Reed snapped, already moving toward the back door. Stay here, and they'll tear you apart looking for answers you don't have. He yanked the door open, the wind rushing in like a howl, and gestured to Mara. Move. The pounding on the front door turned to a crash, wood splintering, hinges groaning. Lila's resolve cracked. She didn't trust Ethan, didn't trust Mara, or this scarred stranger with a crowbar. But the alternative was facing whoever was breaking in. She grabbed her phone from the counter, shoving it into her pocket, and followed Mara out into the night, Ethan stumbling behind her, Reed bringing up the rear. The cliff path was treacherous in the dark, slick with mist and jagged with loose stones. The sea roared below, waves crashing against the rocks like a beast clawing its way up. Lila's bare feet stung as they hit the ground, but she kept moving, the cold air biting her lungs. Behind them, shouts echoed from the house, angry, searching, and flashlight beams sliced through the blackness, hunting. They reached a fork in the path. One trail snaked down to the rocky shore, the other up toward the gorse-covered hills. Ethan pointed downward, panting. The map's that way, hidden in a crevice. We get it. We can bargain. Reed grabbed his collar, yanking him close. Bargain? With them? You're dumber than I thought. Before Ethan could argue, a gunshot rang out, sharp and deafening, the sound bouncing off the cliffs. A bullet whizzed past, embedding itself in the dirt near Lila's feet. She yelped, dropping to a crouch, her hands scraping the ground. Mara pulled her up, urgency in her grip. Go, down the path now. The group bolted, scrambling toward the shore as more shots cracked through the night. The flashlight beams were closer, the voices louder, and Lila's mind raced with a single, desperate thought. What's worth dying for out here? They hit the beach, the sand cold and damp beneath her feet, and Ethan darted toward a cluster of boulders near the water's edge. He dropped to his knees, digging frantically, his hands clawing at the rocks. It's here. I swear, it's here. Mara scanned the cliffs above, her breath ragged. Hurry, Ethan, there, right behind us. Reed stood guard, crowbar raised, his silhouette tense against the moonlit waves. Lila crouched beside Ethan, her anger boiling over. If we survive this, you're telling me everything, no more lies. He nodded, sweat beading on his forehead, and pulled a small, sealed tin from the crevice of a rusted box, barely bigger than a book. He pried it open, revealing a folded, water-stained map, its edges frayed, but intact. This is it. The wreck's coordinates, the stash, everything. A beam of light swept over them, pinning them in place. Drop it, Carver, the guttural voice shouted. Closer now, boots thudding down the path. 3 figures emerged from the darkness, hulking, shadowed, weapons glinting in their hands. Ethan clutched the map to his chest, his eyes wide. Reed stepped forward, ready to fight. Mara whispered, We're out of time. And then, from the sea behind them, a low, mechanical hum, rosy boat engine, cutting through the waves, its lights blinking in the distance, heading straight for the shore. The boat's hum grew louder, its light slicing through the dark as it sped toward the shore. Lila's pulse hammered, sand gritty between her toes, the map trembling in Ethan's hands. Above them, the 3 figures descended, the cliff path boots pounding, flashlight beams jerking, a rifle glinting in the lead man's grip. Drop it now, he roared, voice like a breaking wave. Reed swung his crowbar, eyes on the attackers. Get to the water, he barked. Mara grabbed Lila's arm, pulling her toward the surf, while Ethan hesitated, clutching the tin. Move, Ethan, Lila snapped, shoving him forward. A shot rang out, kicking up sand inches from her feet. She stumbled, heart in her throat, as the boat sleek, black, unmarked hit the shallows. A figure leaned out, shouting, "Get in!" A woman's voice, sharp, unfamiliar. "Who's that?" Lila hissed, but Mara was already wading in, water soaking her coat. "Doesn't matter, go." Reed hauled Ethan by the collar, dragging him into the waves as another bullet whizzed past. The attackers reached the beach, fanning out, closing the gap. Lila splashed into the icy surf, adrenaline numbing the cold, and grabbed the boat's edge. The woman blonde, steely-eyed yanked her aboard, then Mara, Ethan, and Reed. The engine roared, pulling them from shore, as gunfire peppered the water. Lila collapsed on the deck, breathless, staring at Ethan. "Who are they? Who's she?" She jabbed a finger at the woman, steering them into the night. Ethan wiped seawater from his face, voice low. "She's an old friend. Saved us once before." The woman glanced back, smirking faintly, but said nothing. Behind them, the shore shrank, the attackers' lights fading. Reed gripped the map, glaring at Ethan. "This better be worth it." Mara leaned close to Lila, whispering, "It's not over. That wreck's still out there, and they'll kill for it." The boat rocked, the sea stretching endless and black ahead, and Lila realized trust was a luxury she no longer had.